I acquired 33 pounds of prime brisket for a Sunday family gathering. That particular quantity of meat represented $250 from my personal funds. It was beyond my comprehension that my daughter-in-law, Rachel, and her mother, Stella, would arrive completely unannounced with offerings, yet laden with plastic vessels as if attending a complimentary banquet. Upon witnessing my own son, Julian, meticulously boxing up the expertly grilled sustenance for their departure, I uttered 3 pronouncements that permanently concluded the festivities. However, allow me to commence at the outset, for this narrative possesses more interwoven threads than an onion, each layer eliciting a sharper sting than the last. It was a Saturday morning when I resolved to orchestrate this barbecue. Our residence has consistently served as the nexus for our family's assemblies. I am 65 years of age, and throughout my existence, my primary endeavour has been fostering familial cohesion. My late husband, Tom, always maintained that I possessed an innate talent for transforming any occasion into a cherished remembrance. My culinary space is expansive, our garden provides ample room for all, and my heart has perpetually been open to those in need of sustenance and warmth. That morning I awoke with the dawn, a habit ingrained. I prepared coffee for Tom and myself, and while he perused the daily news, my thoughts were already engrossed in menu planning. I envisioned succulent grilled sausages, sharp provolone cheese, a vibrant garden salad, roasted root vegetables, and, naturally, the pièce de résistance, 33 pounds of the most exquisite cuts of beef obtainable, including prime rib, succulent short ribs, tender flank steak, and a selection of pork belly for those with a predilection for something less substantial. Tom observed me over his spectacles as I outlined my intentions. "My dear," he inquired gently, his smile invariably soothing, "is that not a rather substantial quantity? There are but 8 of us." "Oh, Tom, you understand my preference for abundance over scarcity. Furthermore, if there are any remnants, each individual can carry some home for consumption during the week," I responded, diligently noting my procurements in my ledger. Around midday, I ventured to the local purveyor. Mr. Davis, the butcher, has been acquainted with me for over 2 decades. Upon informing him of my requirement for 33 pounds of meat for a family barbecue, he let out a whistle of admiration. "Mrs. Miller," he declared, selecting the choicest cuts, "this promises to be a magnificent feast. Observe this prime rib, its quality is exceptional, and these short ribs are at their optimal maturation." I remitted the $250 without hesitation. While it was a considerable sum, for me, the value of family transcends monetary considerations. I have always held the conviction that a thoughtfully prepared meal is the most eloquent expression of affection. Every dollar allocated to that meat was an investment in shared joy, in resonant laughter, in the familial harmony that holds such profound significance for me. Upon returning home with the provisions, Tom assisted me in organizing everything within the refrigeration unit. The meat occupied the majority of the available space, yet its presence, awaiting its transformation through culinary artistry, filled me with a deep sense of fulfillment. "Tomorrow is destined to be a perfect day," I conveyed to Tom as we stored the final packages. That afternoon, I extended invitations to everyone, confirming their attendance. My initial call was to my son, Julian. He is 32 years old, a diligent individual, but since his union with Rachel 3 years ago, I perceive a subtle shift in his demeanour. It is not that she is an ill-intentioned person, but at times it seems he treads cautiously to avoid causing her displeasure. "Mother, naturally, we shall be present," he affirmed over the telephone. "Rachel is quite eager. Oh, and her mother, Stella, will accompany us. I hope you do not object." "Object? On the contrary, Our home has always maintained an open-door philosophy. Stella, a 60-year-old widow residing alone in a modest dwelling, would, I presumed, appreciate the companionship of a shared family occasion. How deluded I was. I also contacted my nieces, Erica and Louisa, who invariably contribute a homemade dessert or a savoury accompaniment. They comprehend that a family gathering is a collective endeavour, requiring each participant's contribution to ensure its perfection. Sunday dawned with resplendent clarity. The heavens were unblemished by clouds, and the atmosphere carried a refreshing briskness that heralded an ideal day for outdoor activities. I awoke at 7 in the morning, imbued with abundant energy and anticipation. I commenced preparations early. I adorned the expansive patio table with the verdant damask cloth inherited from my mother. I retrieved the fine china reserved exclusively for significant occasions. I meticulously chopped tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers for the garden salad. The piquant aroma of freshly diced onion permeated the kitchen, mingling with the comforting scent of the coffee I kept warm for the approaching guests. Tom assumed responsibility for the grill. His approach to managing the fire has always been characterized by precision. He asserts that the secret to exemplary barbecue lies in patience and expertly prepared charcoal. I observed him arranging the logs, coaxing the embers with a devotion that was uniquely his. Meanwhile, I prepared the roasted potatoes, cleansed the lettuce, and readied all elements so that upon our family's arrival, our sole focus would be enjoyment. At 11 o'clock in the morning, Erica and Louisa made their entrance. As per their custom, they arrived bearing gifts. Erica presented an apple confection she had baked earlier that morning, still emanating a sweet warmth that evoked cherished childhood memories. Louisa arrived with a vibrant medley of fruits and a bottle of ruby-hued wine she had been reserving for a special event. "Aunt Betty, the aroma emanating from within is simply divine," Erica exclaimed, bestowing a kiss upon my cheek. "How may we be of assistance?" This, I mused, is the fundamental difference. They arrived inquiring about how they could contribute, their hands laden with tokens of appreciation, embodying the generous spirit that truly elevates a family reunion. I enlisted their aid in assembling the provolone and slicing the bread. As Tom initiated the grilling of the sausages, all proceeded flawlessly. The residence resonated with mirth. The savoury essence of the meat began to waft through the garden, and I felt utterly in my element. This is my contentment, observing my loved ones united, reveling in the moment, sensing that my domicile is their preferred destination. However, at precisely 12:30, a subtle shift occurred. The chime of the doorbell announced the arrival of Julian, my son, his familiar smile radiating warmth. Yet trailing behind him were Rachel and Stella, and it was then that the first flicker of apprehension ignited. Rachel was attired in a striking crimson gown, elevated heels, and a meticulously applied visage, as though preparing for a grand gala, rather than a casual family barbecue in her mother-in-law's garden. What, however, seized my attention most profoundly was a capacious fabric tote she carried, from which I discerned multiple plastic containers of varying dimensions. Stella, her mother, was equally adorned in a beige ensemble and a substantial handbag. She too carried a satchel, and the rustling it produced, as she moved, suggested an identical cargo of receptacles. "Greetings, Betty," Rachel articulated, her voice modulated to its characteristic dulcet tone when in proximity to others. She offered a perfunctory kiss to my cheek, one of those insubstantial gestures that never quite made contact. "Your residence is exquisitely appointed. The fragrance is delightful." Stella greeted me with a smile that failed to reach her eyes. "Betty, it is a genuine pleasure to see you. Thank you for extending an invitation to your beautiful abode." I waited, anticipating their production of something tangible from those bags. A libation, a confection, even a pre-packaged assortment of biscuits. But no, they deposited their carriers in a secluded spot and proceeded directly to the patio as if they were esteemed patrons of a high-caliber establishment. "Did you not bring anything?" I inquired, striving to maintain a semblance of amiability. "Oh, Betty, we were delayed," Rachel offered with a nervous titter. "However, your culinary prowess is so renowned that anything we might have contributed would have been eclipsed by your remarkable fare." It was an alibi cloaked in flattery, yet my 65 years of experience rendered me astute to such artifices, recognizing when an individual attempts to reframe their inconsideration as a compliment. Julian, my unfortunate son, appeared visibly uncomfortable. I know him intimately, and I could discern from his expression that he too sensed an incongruity, yet he remained silent. He consistently abstains from voicing dissent when it involves contradicting his wife, even when rectitude is at stake. "Well, do not concern yourselves," I stated, "for that is my nature. I endeavor to ensure everyone feels at ease, irrespective of my internal disquiet. The paramount consideration is your presence." We proceeded to the patio, where Tom was already coaxing smoke from the grill, arranging the sausages. Erica and Louisa extended warm greetings to Julian, but I observed a certain reticence in their demeanor towards Rachel and Stella. They too had perceived the underlying tension. "How splendid!" Stella exclaimed upon observing the grill. "Such an abundance of meat. This resembles a professional establishment." "Betty procured 33 pounds, Tom declared with pride, oblivious to the ripple effect that information would instigate. I noticed a spark ignite in Rachel's and Stella's eyes. It was not admiration for my magnanimity, but rather a stark calculation. 33 pounds of meat implied a substantial surplus, and their containers were demonstrably poised for maximal appropriation. 33 pounds, my goodness, Rachel remarked. It is no wonder we brought our vessels. We were certain Betty would be exceptionally generous. Therein lay the candid admission. Their arrival with containers was not coincidental. They had deliberately come equipped to transport provisions without contributing a single coin or even a modest beverage, yet possessing the temerity to present themselves with receptacles, as if my domicile were a public commissary. What transpired subsequently was even more egregious. They occupied their seats at the table with an air of regal expectation awaiting service. Not once did they extend an offer of assistance, while Erica and Louisa moved about with me, transporting serving dishes, dispensing refreshments, and attending to arrangements. Rachel and Stella remained seated, engaged in conversation with each other, absorbed in their mobile devices, and offering commentary on their surroundings. "Oh, how charming your garden is," Stella commented, gesturing towards my floral arrangements. "Although do those blossoms appear somewhat parched? Perhaps they require more hydration." "More hydration? My blossoms were immaculate. I tend to them with devotion daily, nurturing them as if they were my own progeny." Yet she felt compelled to find fault, something to elevate her perceived standing. Rachel was not far behind. "This tablecloth is quite lovely, Betty, but I suspect it has faded somewhat. Do you anticipate acquiring a new one in the near future?" "My mother's tablecloth. The very cloth I used at Julian's nuptials, at every significant birthday celebration, at every family observance, the textile symbolizing our familial legacy and affection, and she disparaged it as if it were a discarded rag." Tom, bless his earnestness, remained oblivious to these remarks, his focus entirely on the grill. However, I absorbed every syllable, every subtle insinuation, every veiled critique, every observation crafted to convey that my home, my cuisine, my efforts were insufficient for their refined tastes. When Tom announced that the sausages were prepared, Rachel and Stella were the first to rise, not to assist in serving, but to secure a position at the forefront of the queue. They helped themselves to voluminous portions, selecting the choicest pieces, and upon resuming their seats, commenced their critiques. "The sausage is palatable," Stella opined, "though perhaps it would have benefited from a touch more salt." More salt. Tom has been engaged in barbecue for 3 decades. He possesses an unerring judgment for seasoning every dish. Yet, she felt compelled to identify a deficiency. Rachel joined the chorus of condemnations, artfully disguised as commendations. "The salad is indeed fresh, Betty, although I might have opted for a less assertive vinegar component, but then again individual preferences vary. My garden salad. The identical preparation passed down from my mother, who in turn learned it from my grandmother. The very salad Julian eagerly devoured as a child and consistently requested. Now it was deemed excessively vinegary. However, what inflicted the deepest wound was observing Julian, my own son, nodding in agreement with every pronouncement issued by his spouse or mother-in-law, as if endorsing their sentiments, as if every act of maternal devotion was suddenly rendered erroneous. As the moment arrived to serve the principal cuts of meat, the situation further deteriorated. Tom had executed a culinary masterpiece. The prime rib was cooked to absolute perfection, succulent within and exquisitely seared without. The short ribs yielded effortlessly from the bone. The flank steak possessed that ideal textural integrity achievable only through years of honed expertise. Yet they unearthed a pretext for disparagement even in this. "Oh, it is unfortunate that the prime rib appears somewhat overdone," Rachel observed, transferring the most substantial portion onto her plate. Overdone? It was immaculate. Any individual with a modicum of barbecue acumen would have recognized that Tom had achieved the precise optimal temperature, yet she felt compelled to find fault. She needed to assert her perceived gastronomic superiority. Stella did not lag behind. "At my residence, I invariably incorporate a whisper of lemon onto the meat prior to grilling. It imparts a distinctive zest. Perhaps on a subsequent occasion you might consider it." Subsequent occasion. She was already contemplating her next greatest repast and critique. The sheer audacity of this woman knew no bounds. However, what truly ignited my ire was the subsequent development. As they partook generously of the meal, notwithstanding their litany of criticisms, they commenced documenting the fare with their mobile devices. "This is ideal for my Instagram feed," Rachel declared, posing with a morsel of meat on her fork. "My associates will undoubtedly experience profound envy." She captured at least 10 distinct images, experimenting with angles, adjusting illumination, ensuring the profusion of food on the table was conspicuously displayed. She then commenced composing text on her phone. "What are you composing?" Julian inquired. "A post detailing this magnificent family barbecue," she responded without diverting her gaze from her device. "I shall caption it, 'Perfect Sunday with the finest meat in the city.' There is nothing quite like a hearty home-cooked meal." Home-cooked meal. She had not contributed in any tangible way. She had not disbursed a single cent. Yet she was fabricating an online persona as if she were the orchestrator, the one responsible for the planning, the expenditure, the meticulous attention to every detail. Stella emulated her daughter's conduct. She too began capturing images and composing messages. "I shall tag all my acquaintances," she announced with a glint of malice in her eyes. "They will surely perceive that I am blessed with an exceptionally benevolent family." Benevolent? Of course, we are benevolent, but there exists a stark distinction between generosity and being treated as a pawn. Erica and Louisa exchanged glances of profound disbelief. They too had recognized the unfolding situation, but their innate politeness precluded any verbal intervention. I too remained taciturn, yet inwardly I experienced a sensation akin to swallowing pulverized glass. After concluding their meal, having indulged in second servings, they began lamenting their fullness and the impossibility of consuming the entirety of the remaining sustenance. "There is an excessive quantity of food," Rachel exclaimed, placing a hand upon her abdomen. "There is simply no means by which we can finish all of this. It would be a lamentable waste of such excellent produce," Stella added with a feigned expression of solicitude. It was at this juncture that their true intentions were unveiled. As if by prearrangement, their bags containing the plastic containers materialized. Vessels of every conceivable size, large ones for the meat, medium ones for the salads, diminutive ones for the sauces. "We wish to ensure nothing goes to waste," Rachel proclaimed, commencing the deployment of the containers. "We can transport some home for the week." Some, they had brought sufficient containers to abscond with half the prepared fare. And the most disheartening aspect of this entire episode was Julian, my own offspring, rising and assisting them without seeking my consent, without considering that perhaps I intended to preserve some of the meat that had cost me $250 of my own money. "Mother invariably prepares more than sufficient," he remarked to his wife and mother-in-law with a smile. "It is preferable that you take it before it deteriorates." It was at this moment that an internal breaking point was reached. Witnessing my son meticulously packing the provisions I had procured, prepared with profound affection, for 2 women to transport away. 2 women who had arrived devoid of any offering, yet with containers strategically positioned after having subjected every element of our endeavor to criticism, I could endure no longer. I rose from my seat, all eyes fixing upon me. The garden fell into a profound silence. I ascended from my chair with a composure I had not previously known. Every gaze was directed towards me. The garden, moments prior alive with chatter and merriment, now felt like a mausoleum. Even the avian chorus had ceased. I advanced deliberately towards Julian, the final container clutched in his grasp, poised to deliver it to Rachel. My footsteps echoed with startling loudness upon the patio tiles. I could feel my heart pounding in my temples, as if on the verge of rupture. Upon reaching him, I met his gaze directly. Those eyes I had known since his nascent moments, which I had observed weeping as an infant, which had radiated triumph at his graduation, which had evinced profound affection on his wedding day. Now they regarded me with bewilderment, uncomprehending the reason for his mother's stoic presence. I gently extricated the container from his hands, not with force but with a palpable firmness that rendered the surrounding silence palpable. "Kindly depart," I enunciated with unwavering clarity. 3 words, a mere trio of pronouncements, yet they sufficed to arrest the world's progression. The ensuing silence was deafening. No one moved, no one inhaled. It was as though I had detonated a temporal ordnance amidst the family conclave. Rachel was the first to exhibit a reaction, her mouth agape like a stranded fish, her eyes instantly welling with theatrical tears. "Betty, how could you utter such a sentiment?" she exclaimed, pressing a hand to her chest as if mortally wounded. "We merely intended to transport a small portion of the sustenance. I did not envisage it would cause you such distress." What? She did not envisage it would cause me distress? Of course, she did not envisage it. She did not envisage it when she arrived without a contribution. She did not envisage it when she presented containers to appropriate my fare. She did not envisage it when she disparaged every meticulously prepared item. She gave no thought to anything beyond self-service. Stella sprang from her seat as if propelled by a coiled spring. Her visage flushed with indignation. This is utterly preposterous. I have never been subjected to such discourse. I am an elder. I deserve respect. Respect. Where was the respect when she arrived at my abode unaccompanied by any offering? Where was the respect when she critiqued my botanical arrangements, my heirloom tablecloth? Where was the respect when she photographed my culinary creations to flaunt online as if they were her own? Respect, madam, is earned, I countered, fixing my gaze intently upon her. And you two have arrived here as if my residence were an establishment offering complimentary sustenance. Julian appeared ashen. He shifted his gaze from me to his wife, from his wife to his mother-in-law, like a lost child incapable of allegiance. Mother, I implore you, he pleaded, his voice trembling. It was merely a misunderstanding. Rachel harbored no intent to offend you. A misunderstanding? To characterize a premeditated scheme to arrive with empty receptacles for the purpose of acquiring provisions gratis as a misunderstanding, to label the incessant critiques, the disparaging remarks, the complete absence of consideration as a misunderstanding. Julian, I declared, my voice possessing an unfamiliar resonance, I expended $250 of my savings on this meat. I dedicated 2 days to its preparation so that you might convene and partake in familial camaraderie. And all I received were criticisms and the audacity to witness you abscond with my provisions. Rachel's lamentations intensified, though these were tears of fury, not sorrow. I was unaware that I was obligated to present an offering. I assumed it was a conventional invitation. Conventional invitation? I ejaculated. Is it customary to arrive at an event with empty containers? Is it customary to disparage everything placed before you? Is it customary to photograph another's sustenance for online ostentation? Tom approached, his hand landing on my shoulder. I could sense his suppressed anger, a controlled fury held in check by a desire to show respect to the family. Betty is absolutely right, he stated, his voice resonating with the deep undertone he reserves for moments of profound distress. This situation is unacceptable. Erica and Louisa offered silent nods of agreement, their faces etched with understanding. They had witnessed the entire ordeal, every dismissive remark, every breach of trust, every instance of disrespect. My son Julian, however, seemed adrift, completely disoriented. Instead of standing by his mother, instead of acknowledging the inappropriate conduct of his wife and mother-in-law, he sided with them. Mum, you're really blowing this out of proportion, he replied, his voice breaking, a sound that pierced my heart. Rachel is my wife. Stella is practically my mother-in-law. They are family. Family. To him, that word represented individuals who preyed on others, who found fault in everything, and who showed no regard for anything. Family shows respect, I retorted, tears welling in my eyes. Family contributes. Family values what they have. This isn't family, Julian. This is exploitation. Rachel momentarily ceased her tears, her gaze fixed on me with an expression I had never encountered before, one of pure, unadulterated animosity. You're a bitter old hag, she spat, her voice laced with venom. You can't handle the fact that your son has his own family now. You're simply jealous because you're no longer the center of his universe. Those words struck me with the force of a physical blow, old, bitter, jealous, as if my love for my son and my desire for respect within my own home was some kind of failing. Stella amplified her attack. It's true, ever since we arrived, you've had a perpetual scowl. It's painfully obvious you can't stand your daughter-in-law. You're one of those overbearing mothers-in-law who can't release their grip on their sons. a toxic mother-in-law. Me, the one who had welcomed them into my home, who had dipped into her savings to accommodate them, who had poured love into the meals she prepared, and who had genuinely strived to make these two women, who arrived with nothing and mouths full of criticism, feel at ease. Julian remained silent, offering no defense. He simply stood by, a passive observer as his wife and mother-in-law verbally assaulted me in my own residence, in my own backyard, after partaking in my hospitality and preparing to abscond with a significant portion of the leftovers. That was the deepest cut, far more profound than the venomous words of two individuals who clearly lacked basic decorum and respect. What truly shattered me was my son's silence, his choice of the path of least resistance, his preference for his mother enduring insults rather than standing up for what was fundamentally right. "Get out," I commanded, a newfound calmness surprising even myself. "Leave my home immediately." "Gladly," Rachel declared, snatching her handbag. "We will never set foot in this house again." "And we certainly won't be expecting you at ours," Stella chimed in, tucking her phone into her voluminous bag. They made their exit with the exaggerated air of wronged royalty, heads held high, possessing the hollow dignity of those who perceive themselves as victims of grave injustice. Yet before she disappeared through the doorway, Rachel turned back, delivering a parting barb. "Julian, I hope you finally see your mother for who she truly is. Today you've witnessed her genuine character." My son's eyes met mine, brimming with a mixture of confusion and pain. For a fleeting moment I harbored the hope that he would reconsider, that he would grasp the validity of my position, that he would offer an apology for the preceding events. But he followed his wife. I watched them recede down the hallway. The sound of the front door closing, the ignition of the car, and then their departure into the distance, left me standing in my backyard, enveloped by a profound stillness that I had never before experienced. The silence that descended after their departure was utterly devastating. I stood in the center of the patio, my gaze falling upon the table laden with dirty dishes, the remnants of a meal I had prepared with such care, the empty containers they had carelessly abandoned in their theatrical exit. It felt as though a destructive tempest had swept through my home, leaving ruin in its wake. Tom was the first to break the somber tableau. He approached and embraced me wordlessly. I could feel his body tremble, a tremor born of the rage he had meticulously contained throughout the afternoon. My husband, a man of peace, consistently sought to sidestep conflict. Yet on this day he had witnessed his wife subjected to humiliation within her own sanctuary. "You did absolutely the right thing," he murmured into my ear. It was high time someone spoke the unvarnished truth. Erica and Louisa also drew nearer. I detected a confluence of admiration and apprehension in their eyes. Admiration for the courage I had mustered to defend my inherent dignity, and apprehension stemming from the knowledge that this incident was unlikely to be the final chapter. "Aunt Betty," Erica began, taking my hand, "we saw everything. Their behavior towards you was appalling. You shouldn't have had to endure that." "Precisely," Louisa concurred. "They arrived as if you were their personal attendant, contributing nothing, finding fault with everything, and then attempting to take half the food. The audacity." Their words offered a meagre solace, yet they could not entirely assuage the ache in my chest. My own son had abandoned me. He had chosen to champion two women who were clearly manipulating him, who had effectively conscripted him into their scheme of humiliation. We remained in that embrace for a while, seeking solace and processing the unfolding events. Then we began clearing the table in a shared, quiet understanding. With each plate I lifted, a fragment of the afternoon resurfaced. Here Rachel had sat, dissecting my salad with criticism. Over there, Stella had voiced her displeasure about my floral arrangements. In that very spot, I had observed Julian meticulously packing away the meat, as if it were a complimentary takeout order. There remained a substantial quantity of food. Ironically, after all the drama surrounding the containers, there was enough meat to last for several days. Tom commenced storing it in the refrigerator while I began washing the dishes, engaging my hands to divert my thoughts. However, my mind relentlessly churned. How had we arrived at this precipice? When had my son ceased to be the man I had nurtured, the one who possessed an innate sense of right and wrong? When had he permitted his wife to transform him into an individual capable of passively witnessing his mother's degradation without offering a single word of defense? Erica and Louisa lingered late, assisting with the cleanup and providing comforting companionship. Once they departed, an overwhelming silence descended upon the house, a silence that seemed to amplify my profound loneliness. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, replaying every moment of the afternoon, every uttered word, every gesture of disdain directed my way. Yet the sting of Julian's betrayal remained the most poignant wound. The ensuing days proved to be the most arduous of my existence. I harbored the fervent hope that my son would reach out, that he would offer an apology, that he would concede his error, but my phone remained stubbornly silent. On the third day, my resolve crumbled. I initiated the call myself. "Hello, Mom," he responded, his voice carrying a chilling coldness I had never before perceived. "Julian, we need to have a conversation," I managed, striving to maintain my composure. "There is nothing to discuss," he retorted with a harshness that fractured my heart. "What you said on Sunday was beyond forgiveness. Rachel has been weeping constantly since then. Stella is so distressed, she required medical attention for her elevated blood pressure." Rachel weeping, Stella at the doctor. The sheer absurdity. The very women who had descended upon my home like emotional leeches were now posturing as the aggrieved parties. "Julian, they arrived with containers at the ready," I explained. "They brought nothing. They found fault with everything, and they intended to abscond with half the food I purchased." "That does not excuse your words to them," he interrupted. "They are older women. They deserve respect." Respect? Where was the respect for his mother? Where was the respect for the woman who had raised him, educated him, and loved him with unwavering devotion for 32 years? "And what about me?" I implored, my voice faltering. "Am I not an older woman who deserves respect? Am I not your mother?" "You are my mother," he stated, his tone carrying the weight of an unwelcome obligation. "But Rachel is my wife, and I will always stand by my wife." There it was, the unvarnished truth. That was his ultimate priority. Not justice, not the inherent rightness of a situation, but the appeasement of a woman who had demonstrably manipulated him. "Very well," I conceded, feeling utterly defeated. "I sincerely hope you find happiness with your choice." "Mum, if you wish to mend things, you know what you must do," he declared before abruptly terminating the call. I knew precisely what I was expected to do. Apologize, grovel like a sycophantic servant, plead for absolution for the transgression of defending my own dignity. That phone call served as a confirmation of a deeply unsettling reality I had been reluctant to accept. I had lost my son, not in a physical sense, but emotionally. The woman he had married had achieved her objective. She had erected an insurmountable barrier between us, a chasm so vast it appeared beyond repair. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into a month. I received no word from Julian. Tom urged me to exercise patience, assuring me that he would eventually outgrow his petulant mood and return, humbled and seeking forgiveness. However, I knew my son, and I understood that as long as he remained under Rachel's sway, no real change would occur. One afternoon, as I was tending to my plants, the very ones Stella had disparaged as wilted. The doorbell chimed. My heart leaped, a flicker of hope igniting the thought that it might be Julian, that he had finally come seeking reconciliation. But upon opening the door, I found Erica standing there. "Aunt Betty, I have something important to tell you," she announced, her expression grave. "Yesterday, I encountered a friend who works in the same office as Rachel. She shared some information that will undoubtedly be painful, but I believe you need to be aware of it." I sank onto the couch, bracing myself for whatever distressing revelations lay ahead. Erica took a deep, steadying breath before commencing her account. "Rachel has been circulating stories at her workplace, claiming you unjustly expelled her from your home. She's been portraying herself as someone who brought a gift, and that you insulted her out of sheer jealousy that Julian married. She's framing the narrative as if you are an overbearing, possessive mother-in-law." A wave of disbelief washed over me, akin to a physical blow. Not only had they subjected me to humiliation within my own dwelling, but now they were actively undermining my reputation, disseminating a thoroughly distorted version of events. "That's not all," Erica continued, her voice laced with concern. "My friend mentioned that Rachel boasts about never spending a penny when visiting others' homes. She actively seeks invitations, devising ways to leave with complimentary food. She views it as a strategic game, a method of reducing her grocery expenses." The initial pain transmuted into an all-consuming rage. This hadn't been a spontaneous outburst or a simple misunderstanding. It had been a meticulously orchestrated plan, a cold, calculated strategy designed to exploit my inherent generosity. "And there's more," Erica added, her hand finding mine reassuringly. "Julian is also recounting his version of events at his workplace. He's been telling people that his mother experienced an inexplicable outburst and that he's concerned about your mental well-being." My mental well-being? My own son was suggesting I was mentally unstable for having the fortitude to defend my own dignity. The world had indeed turned entirely on its head. That evening, after Erica's departure, I sat in my kitchen, a cup of tea warming my hands, and made the most agonizing decision of my life. I would not resort to begging. I would not debase myself. I would not offer an apology for defending my inherent worth. If my son had chosen to align himself with falsehoods and manipulation, then I would stand firmly on the side of my self-respect. I rose from my chair, walked to my bedroom, and retrieved a suitcase from the closet. Tom, engrossed in his reading on the bed, looked at me with evident bewilderment. "Betty, what are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I replied, a sense of calm settling over me, a calmness that was as surprising to me as it was to him. "I'm going to stay with my sister Isabella in Dallas for a while. I need to distance myself from all of this." Tom sat up, alarm etched on his face. "You're leaving? For how long?" "I'm not certain," I responded, my fingers methodically folding my clothes. "Perhaps 2 weeks, perhaps 2 months. I cannot remain here, passively awaiting my son's apology for something I did not do wrong." My sister Isabella resided in a modest dwelling on the outskirts of Dallas. She had been a widow for 5 years and had consistently assured me that her door was always open should I ever wish to visit. I had never envisioned needing her refuge for emotional support. The following day I boarded a bus. Tom expressed a desire to accompany me, but I gently declined. I needed this time to be alone, to process the profound events that had transpired, to reconnect with my inner equilibrium. The bus journey, spanning 4 hours, provided ample time for contemplation. I watched the passing landscape through the window, my mind replaying the 32 years I had devoted to Julian's upbringing, the countless sleepless nights during his infancy, the vigils kept during his fevers, the significant financial sacrifices made to ensure he received the finest education, the immense pride I felt at his college graduation, the sheer joy at his securing his first job. What had all of that culminated in? For him to now treat me as a stranger? For him to elect to defend two women who were demonstrably exploiting him? Isabella welcomed me with open arms, her questions mercifully withheld. That initial evening, she allowed me the space to weep freely, to unburden myself of every detail, every hurtful word, every condescending gesture, every moment of profound humiliation. "Betty," she said upon hearing my entire narrative, "you did nothing wrong. If a son cannot stand by his mother when she is in the right, then there is a fundamental flaw in that relationship." The initial days at Isabella's proved challenging. I awoke each morning devoid of motivation. My appetite vanished, my energy depleted. I had succumbed to a profound despair, one I felt ill-equipped to navigate. However, Isabella, a retired psychologist, offered gentle guidance, gradually helping me to mend. "The pain you are experiencing," she explained one afternoon as we sipped iced tea in her garden, "extends beyond the barbecue incident. It stems from years of an imbalanced dynamic. You were consistently the giver, the one who made sacrifices. And when you finally established a boundary, your son struggled to comprehend or react appropriately." She was correct. Reflecting on the past 3 years since Julian's marriage to Rachel, I recognized a recurring pattern. I was perpetually the one adapting. When their schedules precluded them from joining for lunch, I would invariably alter my own plans. If Rachel expressed a preference for a particular dish, I would readily acquire the necessary ingredients. In moments of their financial strain, I would provide monetary assistance without any expectation of repayment. I had inadvertently cultivated a dynamic where I was the unconditional provider and they were the perpetual recipients. When this established order was disrupted, when I finally declared enough was enough, they were ill-equipped to handle the shift. A week after my arrival in Dallas, Tom contacted me with significant news. "Betty, Julian came to the house yesterday," he reported, his voice taut with a palpable tension. My heart accelerated. What could he possibly want? "He was looking for some documents he had left in his old bedroom, but he also inquired about you." "And what did he say?" I pressed. "He asked if I knew when you were planning to return. I told him I had no idea, that it was entirely up to you." He fell silent for a moment, then asked if I thought he had done something wrong. Had he done something wrong? After a full month of absolute silence, it had only now occurred to him to consider the possibility that he might have erred. "And what was your response?" I told him the unvarnished truth, Betty. I informed him that his mother had been subjected to humiliation in her own home, and that not only did he fail to defend her, but he also sided with those who were causing her distress. A prolonged silence emanated from the other end of the line. "How did he react?" "He began to cry," Tom recounted, his voice catching. "He wept as he had when he was a young boy. He confessed that Rachel had convinced him you were consumed by jealousy, unable to accept his newfound family. However, after this extended period of estrangement, he was beginning to realize that perhaps the situation was not as she had presented it." A lump formed in my throat. My son was finally beginning to awaken from his delusion, but the damage had already been inflicted. The wounds were too deep to be healed by a simple apology. "Did he say anything else?" "He requested Isabella's phone number. I told him he would have to ask you for it first. I didn't provide it. I'm not yet ready to engage in conversation with him. I require additional time to heal, to reclaim my inner fortitude, and to determine the nature of the relationship I wish to cultivate with my son moving forward." In the interim, Isabella was instrumental in my process of self-discovery. We had commenced taking morning walks in the adjacent hills. The invigorating fresh air, the physical exertion, and the sheer beauty of the landscape were gradually restoring my lost vitality. She also enrolled me in a book club for women of a certain age, where I encountered others who had navigated similar adverse, profound heartbreaks. It's remarkable how children sometimes fail to appreciate their mother's sacrifices until it is far too late. One of the women in the group, Mary Ann, a 70-year-old who had been estranged from her son for 2 years over a comparable issue, confided in me. What pains me the most, I shared with her, is that for 32 years I believed I had raised a man of integrity, someone who possessed the capacity to discern right from wrong. And now I discover he can witness his mother's degradation and offer no defense. Children are merely on loan from life, commented another member, Caroline. We nurture them, we shower them with love, we educate them, but ultimately they make their own choices, and at times those choices inflict profound pain upon us. These shared experiences began to illuminate my perspective. I was not alone in this agonizing journey. I was not the sole mother who had been wounded by a son she had unconditionally cherished. One afternoon, while I was absorbed in reading in Isabella's garden, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Betty. It was Julian's voice, tinged with nervousness and a palpable tremor. How did you obtain this number? I inquired, my tone deliberately cool. I asked your niece Erica for it. Mum, I need to speak with you. You are speaking with me. No, on the phone, I want to see you. I want to fly to Dallas to speak with you in person. A part of me yearned to acquiesce immediately, to urge him to come without delay, to believe that a simple embrace, much like in his childhood, would mend everything. However, the wounded part of me, the part that had been subjected to such profound humiliation and betrayal, rendered me more cautious. I'm uncertain if I'm prepared for that conversation, Julian. Mum, please, I've had many realizations. Rachel and I, things aren't good between us. She isn't the person I had believed her to be. Oh, really? Only now was he comprehending this, after having dismissed me as irrational for the past month. What occurred? I asked, more out of a sense of detached curiosity than genuine concern. Last week we attended a barbecue at her parents' home, and I witnessed her behavior firsthand. She arrived with containers. She found fault with the food. She complained incessantly, precisely as she did with you. And when I finally grasped the situation, I understood that you were right. Right, it was only when he found himself in a position mirroring mine, as the host subjected to criticism, that he finally comprehended my feelings. That doesn't alter what transpired, Julian. You abandoned me when I needed you most. I know, Mum, and that is precisely why I wish to come and seek your forgiveness in person, to explain everything that has transpired, to share things I believe you need to know. His voice sounded different, profoundly altered. It was no longer the voice of the manipulated man I had spoken with a month prior. It sounded, dare I say, like the voice of the son I had raised. Very well, I conceded after a considerable period of deliberation. You may come this weekend. On Friday afternoon, as Isabella and I were preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. My heart began to pound with an intensity that made me fear it would leap from my chest. It had been nearly 2 months since I had last seen my son, and I was utterly uncertain of what to anticipate from this reunion. Isabella answered the door, and there stood Julian. He was not the man who had departed my home on that devastating Sunday. He appeared gaunt, had noticeably lost weight, bore dark circles beneath his eyes, and his clothing was creased as if he had slept in them. He looked like a man who had endured an immense emotional ordeal. "Hi, Aunt Isabella," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Is Mum here?" The moment he saw me standing in the hallway, his eyes welled with tears. He did not rush to embrace me as the Julian I once knew would have. He simply stood there, akin to a child acutely aware of his wrongdoing and awaiting his inevitable reprimand. "Hi, Mum," he managed, his voice cracking. "Hello, Julian." The ensuing silence was fraught with awkwardness. Isabella, ever perceptive to subtle dynamics, excused herself, stating she was going to procure some items for dinner, thereby affording us privacy. We settled into Isabella's living room, positioned opposite each other as if we were strangers, encountering one another for the very first time. My son, the very same individual who once nestled in my embrace, who shared in my youthful escapades, who filled me with immense pride and profound delight, now stood before me like a virtual stranger. "Mother," he began, his voice heavy with a discernible struggle, "I've come to implore your pardon, but before I do, it's imperative I recount events that have profoundly altered my perception of this entire situation." I settled into the plush confines of my armchair, preparing to receive his narrative. After a period of 2 months marked by an unnerving silence, the least I could offer was the courtesy of my undivided attention. "Following the unpleasantness at your residence," he continued, his gaze fixed on some unseen point, "Rachel was utterly insufferable for weeks. She incessantly voiced her grievances about your perceived mistreatment, about how unjustly you had behaved. She managed to convince me you harbored jealousy, that you simply could not countenance me having an independent existence." He paused, running his hands over his face, a clear indication of the emotional toll these recollections exacted. However, a fortnight ago, a pivotal event occurred that fundamentally reshaped my viewpoint. Rachel's parents extended an invitation to a backyard cookout at their home. It was her father's birthday celebration and our first occasion to join one of their family functions. His voice grew more strained, as if the very act of reliving the experience inflicted a form of physical discomfort. Rachel suggested we bring along food containers, anticipating there would be an abundance of leftovers. I expressed my reservations, finding the suggestion peculiar and somewhat lacking in decorum, but she insisted, assuring me it was commonplace for all families. I felt a turbulent mix of indignation and a strange sense of vindication. Finally, he was beginning to discern his wife's true nature. Upon our arrival, Rachel greeted her parents with a perfunctory air and then assumed a posture of regal expectation as if awaiting service. Her mother had dedicated the entire day to culinary preparations, had meticulously arranged a splendid table, and had procured a rather expensive vintage of wine, and then Rachel commenced her barrage of criticism. Julian rose from his seat and began to pace the living room, his movements restless, as though the memories were too potent to remain stationary. She informed her mother that the roast was excessively seasoned, that the potatoes were inadequately left undercooked, and that the salad dressing was far too oily. The very same woman who had so effectively persuaded me that your reaction to her criticisms of your cooking was unreasonable was now dismantling her own mother with a volley of caustic remarks. "And what was your response?" I inquired, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Initially, I remained silent, considering it might be their peculiar family dynamic. However, once the meal concluded, she produced the containers and proceeded to fill them with food, as if navigating a complimentary buffet. Julian halted his pacing, standing before the window and gazing out with a distant expression. Rachel's mother appeared visibly discomfited, but uttered no word. Her father, clearly displeased, nonetheless exercised restraint, mindful of the fact that she was his daughter. "And in that moment," he continued, his voice resonating with newfound clarity, "the entire picture became starkly apparent to me, Mother. That's when I truly comprehended the magnitude of what we had inflicted upon you." He turned to face me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. You had invested your resources. You had cooked with genuine affection. You had graciously opened your home to welcome us, and we, in return, behaved like insatiable parasites, finding fault with everything, shamelessly exploiting your boundless generosity. And when you finally reached your breaking point, I abandoned you. Tears began to stream down his face unheeded. Rachel's father drew me aside and confided, "Julian, this is Rachel's modus operandi. She behaves this way at every gathering she attends. She invariably finds something to disparage, and she always takes food home. It's her method of economizing on her grocery expenses. And the most disheartening aspect is that she subsequently fabricates narratives about how poorly the host treated her. I experienced a sensation akin to a physical blow. This was not a mere happenstance. It was not a simple misunderstanding. It was a deliberate and malicious pattern of conduct. Was there anything else he shared? I asked, a knot of apprehension forming in my stomach. Unsure if I truly wished to hear more, he informed me that Rachel had returned home, fabricating a tale that you had summarily dismissed her without provocation. Labeling you as a vindictive and possessive mother-in-law. He, however, asserted that he knew his daughter intimately and possessed a clear understanding of the actual events. He advised me, with considerable earnestness, to seek your absolution without delay before the opportunity passed. Julian resumed his seat, this time positioning himself closer to me. That evening, a most acrimonious dispute erupted between Rachel and me. I confronted her with my newfound understanding. I demanded an explanation for her deception regarding the incident at your home. It was then that her true character was fully revealed. And what was her response? I inquired. She declared me an imbecile for placing more credence in her father's account than in hers, maintaining that all mothers and mothers-in-law share a singular ambition to exert perpetual control over their sons. She then delivered an ultimatum, a classic maneuver of manipulators, compelling the victim to make an agonizing choice between the abuser and those who genuinely cherish them. And what did you tell her? I prompted. I informed her that no one would compel me to make such an impossible choice between my wife and my mother, and that a mutual respect was a prerequisite for both of them. Her reaction was one of unbridled fury. She began to shriek, hurled objects, and subjected me to a torrent of insults. Julian inhaled deeply before continuing. She uttered truly vile accusations against me, mother. She proclaimed me a besotted mama's boy, incapable of maturity and utterly pathetic. And when I conveyed my intention to visit you and offer an apology, she threatened me with divorce. And I told her to proceed as she saw fit, stating that I would gladly embrace divorce over continuing to coexist with someone who had coerced me into betraying my own mother. For the first time in a span of 2 months, a flicker of something akin to pride ignited within me for my son. He had finally summoned the fortitude to assert himself, to champion the cause of righteousness. "We are presently estranged," he stated, his voice imbued with a mournful yet resolute tone. "I have taken up residence in a modest apartment proximate to my place of employment. Rachel remains in the dwelling we jointly acquired, and the legal proceedings will undoubtedly resolve the property matters." "How do you feel about this entire situation?" I asked. "Utterly devastated," he confessed, "but also profoundly relieved. During the 3 years of our marriage, I felt a disconcerting erosion of my very identity, as if I were transforming into someone unrecognizable. Rachel possessed an insidious talent for manipulation, for inducing guilt whenever my desires diverged from her expectations." He shifted closer still, gently taking my hands. "Mother, I am acutely aware that I possess no inherent right to solicit your forgiveness. I recognize the profound pain I have inflicted upon you. I abandoned you during your moment of greatest need. I defended individuals who were actively causing you harm, and to compound matters, I permitted them to utter abhorrent sentiments about you. His hands trembled as they clasped mine. But I need you to understand that over the past 2 months, my thoughts have been with you incessantly. Each morning I awoke burdened by the weight of my transgressions. And with each passing day that I refrained from contacting you, it represented another instance of my personal cowardice. Why did it take you so long to comprehend? I inquired, the question that had been a source of torment for me throughout this ordeal. Because it was far simpler to accept the premise that you were in the wrong rather than to acknowledge that I had wedded someone undeserving of such a union. It was easier to entertain the notion that you were a difficult mother-in-law rather than to confront the reality that I had betrayed the woman who loved me more than any other soul on this earth. Those words resonated deeply within my heart. However, the lingering pain was substantial. Julian, I articulated, what wounded me most profoundly were not the pronouncements of Rachel or Stella. What truly shattered me was witnessing you meticulously pack that meat for them to transport, as if it were entirely commonplace for your mother to expend her resources to feed individuals who had convened with the express purpose of humiliating her. I comprehend, Mother, and I offer no justifications for my actions. All I can convey is that I was utterly deluded, thoroughly manipulated, yet this offers no absolution. A significant silence descended between us, pregnant with the accumulated pain and the multitude of unhealed wounds. What do you now expect of me? I finally inquired. I expect nothing, he replied with unfeigned sincerity. My sole purpose was to implore your absolution and to affirm my enduring affection for you. Should you grant me the opportunity to mend our fractured connection, I will dedicate every fiber of my being to regaining your confidence. And if forgiveness remains beyond your reach, I will undoubtedly understand. I regarded my son for an extended period, utterly wordless. I perceived the genuine remorse etched upon his features, yet I could also feel the raw wounds within my heart still bleeding profusely. Forgiveness, I stated, is not an instantaneous switch. It is a protracted and arduous process, particularly when the perpetrator of the injury is the one you cherish most profoundly in this world. Julian, I finally declared, I appreciate your considerable effort in journeying here to offer your apologies, and I am relieved that you have at last achieved clarity regarding Rachel. However, I cannot simply feign ignorance of recent events. His countenance clouded with an expression of profound sadness, yet he offered a nod of comprehension. I require a period of reflection, I continued. I must process all of this. For the past 2 months, I have been engaged in the arduous task of rebuilding my self-esteem, of rediscovering my inherent worth after enduring such profound humiliation within my own domicile, orchestrated by my own kin. I comprehend perfectly, he responded in a subdued tone. My intention was not to request that you obliterate the past. I merely wished to impart the truth and to seek your absolution. At that precise moment, Isabella returned, her arms laden with shopping bags, and the palpable tension in the room momentarily eased. She earnestly urged Julian to remain for supper, and though he initially demurred, he ultimately acceded. During the meal, my son elaborated on further details pertaining to the period following our estrangement. He recounted his sleepless nights, his burgeoning tendency to scrutinize every assertion made by Rachel, and his gradual re-evaluation of past occurrences through a revised lens. Do you recall your birthday celebration last year? He inquired as we savored the dessert Isabella had thoughtfully prepared. Which one? I responded, though I was acutely aware of the specific occasion he referenced. The one where Rachel claimed to be experiencing a debilitating headache and thus could not attend. Yet that very evening she ventured out for dinner with her companions, appearing in perfect health. I vividly recollected that particular birthday. It had been one of numerous instances where Rachel had contrived an excuse to avoid my company. At the time, it had caused me distress, but I had rationalized it by assuming she might have felt genuinely uncomfortable. It now dawns on me that she never harbored any desire to be an integrated part of our family. Julian continued. She consistently sought pretexts to evade our gatherings, and when she did grace us with her presence, it was invariably to derive some personal advantage. Isabella, who had been observing the exchange in quiet contemplation, finally interjected. Julian, what I deem most significant in this entire affair is not merely your realization of Rachel's true character, but rather your courage in admitting your own culpability and your decision to seek your mother's forgiveness. My sister's observation was astute. It would have been a far simpler path to assign sole blame to Rachel, portraying himself as an unfortunate victim of manipulation. However, Julian was embracing accountability, acknowledging his own flawed decision-making. That evening, subsequent to Julian's departure for the hotel where he was lodging, Isabella and I convened in her garden for a discourse. "What is your intention?" she inquired as we sipped our tea. "I am uncertain," I replied with unvarnished honesty. A portion of me yearns to embrace him and extend immediate forgiveness, yet another segment feels a pressing need for additional time. "It is entirely natural to experience such conflicting emotions," Isabella remarked. "A mother's love is an enduring force, but trust necessitates reconstruction, a process that inherently demands time." The following morning, Julian arrived early, bearing an assortment of pastries from a local bakery and a robust brew of coffee. The three of us shared breakfast, and for a fleeting moment, the atmosphere approximated the warmth of our past, reminiscent of his youthful weekend visits. However, I was acutely aware that a return to the preceding state was untenable. Too much had transpired. I myself had undergone a transformation. "Mother," he commenced as Isabella excused herself to attend to some personal errands, leaving us in a state of solitude. "I have a question for you, and I require your utmost candor. Tell me, do you genuinely believe you will ever be capable of extending complete absolution to me? Do you perceive any possibility of our relationship reverting to its prior state?" The query struck me with the force of a physical blow, as it mirrored the very question that had been occupying my mind since my arrival. "Julian," I responded after a prolonged period of contemplation, "as you have requested, I shall be entirely forthright with you. My heart overflows with an unyielding love for you, and this sentiment shall never wane. You are my son, an intrinsic part of me, and that fundamental truth remains immutable." I observed a subtle easing of tension in his demeanor, but my statement was not yet complete. "However," I continued, "I cannot definitively affirm whether our relationship can recapture its exact former configuration. This is because, previously, I was a mother who unreservedly gave of herself without expectation of reciprocation, who readily excused every facet of her son's conduct, and who consistently relegated her own needs to a position of secondary importance." I paused, gathering my thoughts. Over the past 2 months, I have embarked on a journey of self-discovery, learning to value and respect myself and to establish firm boundaries. I am unequivocally not the same woman who departed prior to that ill-fated barbecue, and this newly constituted version of myself requires a more equitable partnership, one characterized by mutual esteem. Julian listened with an intensity that suggested each word held profound significance for him. "Does this imply you no longer desire my presence in your life?" he inquired, his voice tinged with a tremor. "No," I clarified. "It signifies that if you are to re-enter my life, It must be under different auspices. I need to perceive your respect for me as an individual, not merely your love for me as a maternal figure. I require the assurance that should anyone in the future exhibit disrespect towards me, you will stand by my side, provided my position is justifiable. I can pledge that to you, he declared with conviction. I will never again permit anyone to treat you disparagingly in my presence. I will never again opt for the path of least resistance when confronted with the imperative to champion what is right. Promises are readily offered in moments of contrition, I observed. It is your actions, the passage of time, and the unwavering consistency of your behavior that will ultimately persuade me. Julian inclined his head in acknowledgement, recognizing that this endeavor would be a protracted one. What do you require from me? He inquired. I require your understanding that trust is meticulously cultivated over time. I require your respect for my temporal considerations, my decisions, and my established boundaries. And I require tangible evidence, through your actions rather than mere words, of what you have gleaned from this experience. Are we commencing anew from the very beginning? He queried. No, not from absolute zero, I clarified. We possess 32 years of shared history, and the majority of those years were indeed beautiful. However, we must inaugurate a new chapter, one where both of us exhibit greater maturity, enhanced awareness, and a heightened degree of mutual respect. That afternoon, prior to Julian's return journey to Los Angeles, we embarked on a leisurely stroll through the undulating hills. This had been a cherished pastime during his adolescence, and the present excursion felt imbued with a comforting sense of familiarity. Mother, he remarked as we ascended a winding trail, there is something further I feel compelled to disclose to you. And what might that be? I inquired. Rachel is pregnant. I came to an abrupt halt, my progression arrested. Amidst all the potential revelations I might have anticipated, this was the least conceivable. Pregnant, I repeated, a sensation akin to icy water cascading over me. She is 2 months along, he confirmed. I ascertained this information just prior to our separation. In fact, it was a significant contributing factor to the prolonged deliberation before I made the decision to depart from her. My mind began to grapple with the profound implications of this news. I was to become a grandmother, yet the mother of my grandchild was an individual who harbored animosity towards me, who had disseminated falsehoods about me, and who had subjected me to indignities within my own home. And what course of action do you intend to pursue? I asked. I intend to embrace fatherhood, he stated, his voice resonating with a blend of sorrow and unwavering resolve. Irrespective of the circumstances that transpired between Rachel and me, that child is my progeny, and I am resolutely committed to being a present figure in its life. And what does this signify for our relationship? I inquired, a tremor of apprehension coloring my tone. It signifies that the circumstances will become considerably more intricate, he admitted. However, I will not permit Rachel to weaponize our child against you. This infant will come to know its grandmother. It will be raised with the awareness of possessing a loving family. This presented a complex predicament, introducing an additional layer of difficulty to our already strained connection. Yet it also offered a glimmer of hope. Julian was articulating a determination to safeguard my role in my grandchild's existence, to prevent my exclusion from my own familial lineage. I too require time to process this development, I informed him. I understand, he replied. My sole intention was to apprise you directly, ensuring you did not receive this information through an indirect source. Upon our return to Isabella's residence, Julian prepared for his departure. We embraced, marking our first physical contact in 2 months. While it lacked the effusive warmth of our prior embraces, it represented a nascent step forward. "I will contact you next week," he promised, "if you wish me to." "Yes," I responded, "I do wish for you to." I observed him as he receded down the street, experiencing a peculiar admixture of emotions. There was a palpable sadness for all that had been lost, a burgeoning hope for what might yet be salvaged, and a sensation akin to profound peace for having maintained my personal dignity intact. 6 months subsequent to that pivotal conversation in Dallas, I find myself seated in my kitchen, composing these reflections while awaiting the arrival of my son, accompanied by my newborn granddaughter. Indeed, a granddaughter. Rachel gave birth to a delightful baby girl, whom they christened Sophia, and today marks my inaugural encounter with her. The intervening months following Julian's visit to Isabella's abode were characterized by a gradual yet consistent process of relational reconstruction. He honored his commitment. He maintained weekly contact, consistently respecting my boundaries and never exerting undue pressure. He shared updates on the pregnancy's progression, his strategies for navigating the separation, and his preparations for single fatherhood. For, yes, Julian and Rachel ultimately divorced. She attempted to leverage this as a retaliatory measure against me, forbidding him from visiting unless he wished to remain actively involved in the pregnancy. However, my son had absorbed the lessons of the past. He unequivocally informed her that I was his mother and that I would be an integral part of his daughter's life, irrespective of her assent. I returned to Los Angeles 3 months after my departure. Isabella's steadfast support had been instrumental in my recuperation, aiding me in rediscovering my inner fortitude and comprehending that self-love is not an act of selfishness, but rather a crucial component of emotional survival. Upon re-entering my home, I was no longer the same woman who had left. I was demonstrably stronger, more self-assured, and far less inclined to tolerate any form of disrespect. Tom welcomed me with open arms and shared some intriguing news. During my absence, he had maintained communication with Erica and Louisa, who had conveyed information that proved quite astonishing. It transpired that following the dramatic events at the barbecue, Rachel had disseminated her distorted interpretation of occurrences throughout the neighborhood. However, Erica and Louisa had conversed with other individuals acquainted with Rachel and had uncovered that I was not her inaugural victim. Mrs. Johnson, a resident 3 blocks distant, recounted that Rachel had exhibited identical behavior at her grandson's christening. Tom elaborated on that initial evening of my return, stating that she had arrived with containers, offered criticisms of everything, and subsequently departed, voicing complaints of mistreatment. "Really?" "And not only that," Tom continued, "Louisa's sister also encountered difficulties with her. She extended an invitation to her birthday celebration, and Rachel conducted herself in precisely the same manner. It appears to be her established pattern of operation." The realization that the experience had not been a personal vendetta, that I had not specifically merited such treatment, proved immensely beneficial in processing the entirety of the situation. Rachel, it seemed, was simply that type of individual, one who exploited the generosity of others and then assigned blame when confronted. When Julian learned of my return, he sought permission to visit. His presence within the household felt peculiar after all that had transpired. He occupied the same armchair he had frequented as a young boy, yet the atmosphere felt fundamentally altered. "How are you, Mother?" he inquired, and I could discern a genuine desire to ascertain the truth of my response. "I am doing well," I replied, and indeed it was the truth. I am a different person, but I am well. During that visit, we meticulously established new parameters for our relationship. I would no longer function as the mother who offered boundless support without commensurate reception. I would no longer countenance the justification of disrespectful conduct. I would no longer relegate my own dignity to a subordinate position relative to the needs of others. "I understand," he articulated upon hearing my articulation of my revised boundaries, "and I wish for you to know that I respect them." The subsequent visits gradually evolved into a more comfortable dynamic. Julian brought floral arrangements, offered assistance with meal preparation, and proactively inquired about any tasks he could undertake. These small gestures clearly demonstrated his comprehension that respect is best conveyed through actions rather than mere pronouncements. When Rachel gave birth, circumstances once again became complicated. She attempted to obstruct Julian from informing me of the birth, but he was no longer the readily impressionable individual he once was. He contacted me from the hospital to convey the joyous news of a beautiful and healthy granddaughter. "Rachel is expressing a preference that you not visit the hospital," he conveyed with a touch of sorrow. "As soon as I can bring Sophia to my place, I'll introduce her to you." It didn't bother me that I couldn't visit the hospital. I had learned long ago not to take Rachel's mean-spirited actions personally. What mattered most was that my son was upholding his word, ensuring I wouldn't be kept from my granddaughter. In the initial weeks following the birth, Julian faced significant hurdles in getting Sophia to his apartment. Rachel attempted to control him by leveraging the baby, but he remained steadfast. He even hinted at legal action if it became necessary. "I refuse to let her weaponize my daughter," he expressed to me over the phone one evening, his voice weary. "Sophia deserves to know her grandmother, and you have a right to know your granddaughter." And here we are. Julian is about to arrive any moment with 3-week-old Sophia. I've meticulously prepared everything. The bassinet he slept in as an infant, the baby clothes I so eagerly acquired, and a grandmother's heart overflowing with love, ready to welcome this new little member of our family. I can hear the car pulling into the driveway. It's him. When I open the door, I see my son holding a tiny baby. Sophia is exquisite. She possesses Julian's eyes and a certain something in her expression that brings back memories of him as a baby. "Mom," he says, a broad smile lighting up his face, "I'd like you to meet your granddaughter, Sophia." The moment I cradle her in my arms for the very first time, an unadulterated joy washes over me, a feeling I haven't experienced in ages. This innocent infant is entirely removed from the complexities of adult disputes. She merits nothing but affection, care, and a family devoted to her protection. "Hello, my darling," I murmur, watching her drift off to sleep. "I'm your grandma, Betty." Julian meets my gaze, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Mum, I need you to understand something, regardless of what transpires with Rachel. No matter what challenges arise, Sophia will always know who her grandmother is. She will grow up understanding your love." "Thank you," I respond, unable to suppress my own tears. We spent the entire afternoon together, the three of us. Julian shared his aspirations as a single father, detailing how he's restructuring his life to provide Sophia with everything she requires. He also informed me that Rachel has finally conceded that I will be a part of the baby's life, even if it displeases her. "You know what's truly ironic about all of this?" he asks as I gently feed Sophia her bottle. "What?" "Rachel always insisted you were controlling, that you sought to dictate my life. Yet ultimately, it was she who attempted to govern every facet of my existence. You simply wished to shower me with love and grant me the freedom to make my own choices. It's the absolute truth. For 32 years, my sole objective had been to nurture him into a good, self-reliant man, capable of discerning right from wrong. Manipulation was never my modus operandi. When the time comes for them to depart, it's difficult to bid Sophia farewell, but I know this is merely the inception. I know I will witness her growth. I will be an integral part of her life. I will have the opportunity to cherish her with the depth she deserves. We'll be back next week. Julian assures me as he secures the baby in her car seat. I'll be anticipating it, I reply, and for the first time in a very long while, I sense that the future is brimming with wonderful possibilities. That evening, as Tom and I dine alone, I reflect on the entire sequence of events. I had lost a son for a period, but gained a man. I had severed a detrimental connection with a manipulative daughter-in-law, but acquired a cherished granddaughter. I had shed my boundless patience and my inclination to rationalize everything, but cultivated self-respect and established healthy boundaries. Do you regret uttering those 3 words that Sunday? Tom inquires. No, I respond without a moment's hesitation. They were the most liberating words I've ever spoken, because sometimes to embark on a new chapter, to reclaim lost dignity, to educate people on how to treat you, all it takes is saying, "Get the hell out," and then backing it up with your actions. Today, I am a 65-year-old woman who comprehends her own value, who refuses to tolerate disrespect from anyone, who loves profoundly, but also cherishes herself. I am Sophia's grandmother, Tom's wife, Julian's mother. But more importantly, before any of that, I am Betty, and Betty warrants respect. And now, whenever I host a barbecue, I do so exclusively for individuals who arrive with their hands full and their hearts brimming with appreciation, because that's the only way to truly live, surrounded by people who understand how to value generosity rather than exploit it. Life has continued, but now I navigate it on my own terms. 2 years have elapsed since that pivotal Sunday that irrevocably altered my life, and I find myself in my kitchen orchestrating another barbecue. However, this time everything is markedly different. The table is set for 6 individuals. Tom and I, Julian with Sophia, who is now 2.5 years old, and Isabella, who has journeyed from Dallas to spend a few days with us. Sophia is darting across the lawn, gleefully pursuing butterflies with that boundless energy unique to young children. Every time she catches sight of me, she exclaims, "Grandma Betty!" and rushes to embrace me with those cherubic arms that melt my heart. She is bright, sweet, and thankfully possesses none of her mother's volatile temperament. Julian has blossomed into an exemplary father. He exerted considerable effort to secure joint custody of Sophia, and now she resides with him for half of the week. The days she spends with me are occasions of pure delight. We have established a wonderful rhythm. She arrives on Wednesdays following preschool and remains until Friday morning. "Mom," Julian remarks as he gathers Sophia's scattered toys from the living room floor, "did I happen to mention Rachel relocated to Las Vegas?" "Really?" I inquire as I slice tomatoes for the salad. "She departed with a gentleman she met at her workplace. Initially, I anticipated this might complicate Sophia's visits, but as it turns out, it's proving more beneficial for her. She doesn't have to encounter me as frequently." It's quite amusing how circumstances resolve themselves. Rachel has finally found another individual to manipulate, and we have reclaimed the familial tranquility we had lost. Julian has undergone significant personal growth over these past 2 years. He is no longer the uncertain young man who allowed himself to be swayed. He now makes his own determinations, champions his convictions, and most crucially, he is an involved and devoted father. "Do you have any idea what Sophia shared with me yesterday?" he asks while assisting me in setting the plates on the table. "What did she say?" "She inquired as to why Grandma Rachel never visits, yet Grandma Betty is consistently present. I explained to her that families are diverse, but the paramount aspect is that she is enveloped by people who cherish her. Hearing this brings me to tears. Sophia is already absorbing the unspoken lesson, discerning intuitively who the individuals are who genuinely care for her and who are absent by their own volition. Isabella emerges onto the patio bearing a tray of hot dogs she prepared this morning. My sister has been my steadfast pillar of support throughout this entire ordeal. Whenever I experience doubts, whenever I question whether I was perhaps too severe, she gently reminds me that defending one's dignity is never an inappropriate act. Do you recall what you imparted to me 2 years ago? I ask her as we arrange the hot dogs on the table. What was that? That children are transient gifts from life, that eventually they forge their own paths. And I was right, she affirms with a smile. Julian made the correct choice, even if it took him a little while. Tom enters from the supermarket, laden with wine and ice. At his age, he remains the most patient and sagacious individual I know. Throughout this entire familial upheaval, he served as my anchor, my unwavering source of support. How's the grill? I ask him. Perfect. We can commence cooking the meat in about an hour. This time I procured only 11 pounds of meat. I no longer feel the compulsion to impress anyone or to ostentatiously display my generosity. I cook with love for those who genuinely appreciate it, not for those who perceive it as an unearned entitlement. As we finalize preparations, I contemplate the profound transformation of circumstances. Erica and Louisa continue to frequent my home, and invariably, they bring something to contribute. The distinction now is that I also visit their residences, bringing desserts or salads. Our familial connections have evolved into a more equitable and salubrious state. Grandma Betty, Sophia calls out from the yard. Come see the flower I discovered. I hasten outside to observe her find. It's a diminutive daisy that has sprouted between the flagstones on the pathway. To her, it represents the most exquisite treasure in existence. How lovely! I exclaim, lifting her into my arms. Shall we place it in a small vase with some water? Yes, so it doesn't wither. We proceed inside together in search of a small vase. As I pour water into it, Sophia gazes at me with those expansive eyes, alight with curiosity. Grandma, why does Daddy say you're the bravest woman he knows? The question genuinely surprises me. Your daddy says that. Yes, he asked Uncle Tom why you're brave, and Uncle Tom replied, It's because you always speak the truth, even when it's difficult. I am deeply touched. It's profoundly rewarding to know that my experiences, however challenging they may have been, are translating into valuable life lessons for my granddaughter. Sometimes, my dear, I explain as we position the daisy in its miniature vase, people do not treat us with kindness, and when that occurs, we must summon our courage and assert ourselves. Like when Martin snatches my toys at school. Precisely. You are not obligated to permit anyone to take your belongings without your consent. It is remarkable how children grasp complex concepts through simple analogies. Sophia is learning from an early age something that took me 65 years to fully internalize. That respect is earned and maintained by establishing clear parameters. The afternoon unfolds with perfect harmony. We dine on the patio, our conversation punctuated by laughter, shared anecdotes, and the simple enjoyment of each other's company. Julian assists me with serving without being prompted. Isabella entertains Sophia with captivating stories. Tom expertly tends to the grill, embodying his mastery of the task. As we conclude our meal, Sophia succumbs to sleep in my embrace. I carry her indoors and gently place her on the couch, tucking her in with a soft blanket. Observing her sleep so serenely, so securely, instills in me a profound sense of peace. Mum, Julian says as I rejoin him on the patio, I want to express my gratitude to you once more for everything. For what? For teaching me that cherishing someone does not equate to tolerating anything. For demonstrating that forgiveness is possible without forgetting. For standing firm until I comprehended what truly holds significance. His words resonate deeply within my soul. For an extended period, I grappled with the conviction of whether my decision to remain resolute, To refrain from immediate capitulation when he offered an apology was indeed the right course of action. However, I now recognize that my steadfastness was essential for our relationship to be reconstructed upon a robust foundation. Julian, I state, taking his hand, the sole aspiration I ever harbored was to raise you into a virtuous man. At times the pathways become circuitous, but the crucial element is knowing how to retrace your steps to the correct one. And I managed to do so thanks to you. While Isabella and Tom discuss the Dallas Hills, Julian and I remain in comfortable silence, savoring this moment of familial accord. The former tension between us has dissipated. There are no longer any subjects deemed taboo, no lingering unhealed wounds. When the time arrives to clear the table, everyone contributes without requiring explicit instruction. Sophia awakens and expresses a desire to participate, diligently transporting used napkins to the waste receptacle with the gravitas of someone fulfilling a significant undertaking. You know what the most beautiful aspect of all of this is? I remarked to Tom as we washed the dishes. What is that? That Sophia is maturing within a family environment where mutual respect is paramount. She will never be exposed to detrimental dynamics. She will never normalize a deficiency in regard. It is true, he affirms, bestowing a kiss upon my cheek. You are absolutely correct to establish boundaries for all things. Behold the fruits of your endeavors. When everyone has departed and the house has once again fallen silent, I settle into my preferred armchair with a comforting cup of tea. I reflect upon the woman who, 2 years prior, had expended $250 on a barbecue, only to endure profound humiliation within her own home. That woman no longer exists. In her stead stands this transformed iteration of myself, a grandmother who relishes her granddaughter's company without any compulsion to prove her worth, a mother who maintains an adult and balanced connection with her son, a woman who comprehends her intrinsic value and will accept nothing less than what she rightfully deserves. Occasionally, I receive indirect news concerning Rachel. According to Julian, her existence in Las Vegas is not as idyllic as she purports on social media, yet it no longer elicits anger or schadenfreude within me. She is simply an individual who crossed my path, imparted a valuable lesson, and then moved on. The most significant revelation I've gleaned from this entire experience is that it is never too late to effect change, to evolve, to stand resolutely for oneself. At 65 years of age, I have discovered an inner fortitude that I never knew I possessed. And the most gratifying aspect is that I deploy this strength not for antagonism or retribution, but to love more fully, to demand respect, and to cultivate healthier interpersonal connections. Tomorrow, Sophia will once again grace my home. We shall endeavor to bake cookies together. I will read her stories and, through my actions, impart the understanding that being a commendable person does not equate to exhibiting weakness. Because ultimately, everything I endured was undeniably worthwhile for this very moment. Sitting within the sanctuary of my home, at peace with myself, assured that my family regards me with respect and genuine affection. And should anyone ever inquire about the most significant juncture of my life, I shall recount that particular Sunday when I articulated 3 words that irrevocably restored my dignity. Did you find my narrative engaging? And from which city are you tuning in? Let's connect in the comments section. If the story resonated with you, consider offering your support through a super thanks, enabling me to continue delivering more narratives of this nature. Your gracious support is deeply appreciated. I eagerly anticipate your thoughts on the story. On your screen, you can observe 2 additional life narratives that I highly endorse. My channel offers a wealth of further content. Please remember to subscribe. Until our next life story, with warmth and utmost respect,